9th edition is officially upon us. Well, at least it is from a rules talking perspective. And we've been lucky enough to be playtesting and previewing the game because GW sent us some of the rules early. So today, we're going to be going over the biggest things that have changed in the game that you're going to need to know to start playing it well. So let's go through it.
So really at the heart of the game, we are looking at 8.5 edition. However, those changes that do exist are actually very, very big ones. They massively impact the way you build your armies, the way you play things, and there's just a lot of fundamental changes that have a really high impact.
Yeah, almost every single rule in the book has been changed at least a little bit. And one of the nice things is they've clarified some other things. There's still a few things in this new set of the rules that have that need some more clarification. But today what we're going to be doing is going through about 10-ish really big things that have changed in the game. About another 10-ish kind of smaller things. But all together, they're going to add up to some pretty substantial changes.
Absolutely. So let's dive right in. So the first big one we want to talk about is going to be the biggest change for you ITC players, right? A lot of the book missions are kind of about killing, but it's the ITC players that are used to saying, every turn I need to get a kill, I need to get something in first strike often. That is pretty much all gone, right?
Yeah, so the idea here is that there are missions in this book. And the missions here, we've even seen this, we've seen it talked about by the ITC community and even other events, that these are going to be kind of universal missions that is going to be used across the world, which is great. Before we saw a lot of fragmentation at different events, and then what you would play at home. It's nice now that we're going to see that unification. And one of the things they've unified is that these missions do not have kill points.
That's right.
You do not score for killing, you score for holding and then secondaries. This might seem small, but when you take out the need to kill as part of a mission, you entirely change the kind of armies that are brought to the table.
100%. And yeah, we cannot stress this enough. This is the primary mission for all of the major missions, right? They might have a special primary that is unique to each mission, but the basis of the game is generally holding a couple objectives, holding more than your opponent, and that is it, right? So we're used to combining these things, but we're really exciting. The secondaries have a lot of diversity to them, but just kind of getting everyone under the same umbrella is huge, right?
And if you haven't seen the missions, the primary objective is worth 45 points.
That's right.
You can score a maximum of 15 per turn, which means if you had 3 turns of maxing your primary, you've now maximized your primary for the entire game. So you don't need, out of a 5-turn game, of course it is only a 5-turn game, you've got that, and now you can maximize your points pretty quickly. Now your secondaries, another 45 points. You get 15 per secondary. And of course, those last 10 points come from having a battle-ready army, fully painted. I think we really love this. We have a lot of painted models here.
It's great. It's a good change. Obviously, it's a bit rough around going to tournaments and things like that, but I like it. I like that Games Workshop was bold enough to put that in the rules and just say, hey, man, let's care about that. It will actually affect a bit of the sort of meta chasing, which is a good thing. And so yeah, that's the heart of the game. I know there's been a lot of discussion around, well, you get this many points for the primary. How does it max out? Now you guys know. And getting those 15 points is not easy, right?
Yeah, if you're going to see how hard it is, because at 6 o'clock p.m. tonight, we're going to be going live with our first game, so you're not going to want to miss that. So let's jump into the second point. It's the idea that you now cost CP to buy detachments instead of getting CP from detachments. It's quite a reversal.
It's 100% a reversal. At this point, we've seen the Supreme Command sort of abilities, the Master Commander, things like that let you refund one, basically, right? So you can get a battalion or a brigade essentially for free, and beyond that, you have to pay. So. On one hand, this is very exciting, but it does affect every army very differently, right? So for example, I play a lot of orcs. I was excited to see that I don't have to take 9 troop choices.
That's right.
But immediately I start capping out on HQs.
Yeah.
So in every army's...
The number of slots in a detachment actually matter. Every time we're writing lists, we're running out of slots, which is the way it always should have been.
It should have been.
This works so much better because it allows much more varied and flexible list construction. No longer does everyone have to have that base 600, 700 points that's just required. You can now do almost anything, and it's a playable army now, which is going to unlock a ton more play styles. I love it a lot more, and it doesn't require you to kind of pay tax and bring units you don't want to bring.
Yeah, and it's much more narrative, right? It was always weird to me that the gigantic guard brigade that's a column of tanks is somehow more coordinated than like a small kill team of Death Watch or something.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, roughly half the armies in the game are getting much more CP. And about a third or a quarter of the armies in the game are getting double or triple or quadruple the amount of CP. So there are some armies like Custodies, like Tau, that are getting tons more CP There's armies like Space Marines that are getting a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then there's armies like Genestealer cults that are getting like less.
Yeah.
Kind of Genestealer cults and orcs that are getting maybe a little less.
That's right.
So in the end, there's some winners and losers there, but many more winners than losers.
And a quick addendum to that, there's been a lot of discussion around, well, if you don't have to take these things, why do you take troops? Again, see point A about having to hold the objectives.
That's right.
Things like that.
At the end of the day,
still useful.
You still need that OBSEC. Okay, well, this next big one, and we've been talking about this a lot, is the idea that they've changed the way terrain works. Now, if you were playing out of the GW book before, you played true line of sight, which meant that realistically, most of your boards were probably very open for shooting. Now, in tournaments, that was clearly not a balanced way to play the game. So most tournaments instituted a ground floor blocks line of sight rule. I know many people play with it at home in their casual games. We certainly did at my narrative club. And here we've been playing with it.
Right.
But GW modified that. Ground floor blocks line of sight, but it's actually more. It actually ground floor, second floor, third floor, they all block line of sight as long as it's a 5-inch ruin.
Yep.
But as soon as you're touching the terrain, you can see through it and be seen through it.
That's right.
What this functionally does is reduce the amount of line of sight blocking terrain in the game as opposed to 8th edition.
Yeah, one thing that you can do is if you're bigger monsters or vehicles, you can sort of stay completely hidden and then suddenly have this gigantic shooting lane, right? It sounds at first like you have more line of sight blocking, but what we found in practice is if you can position those key shooting units on one of these ruins and just peek out, it's really devastating. Line of sight is completely massively changed.
Yeah.
This is probably one of the biggest things as far as impact on gameplay.
This changes the game a ton. So functionally, in our experience, it means that you have more line of sight blocking turn 1.
Yep.
Less turn 3, 4, 5.
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
And so the turn 1 alpha has been taken down a bit. And it's been taken down for 2 key reasons. 1, yes, you have more line of sight. And 2, there's less incentive to go ahead and kill turn 1.
That's right.
And I think, you know, GW didn't really love that alpha strike portion of the game. So they've reduced it.
Right.
But every other turn got deadlier in response.
It's massive. Yeah.
So this is a huge buff for shooting armies. And it's a huge nerf for combat armies.
Yep.
And ultimately what this is going to mean is that at least at the start of this edition, I have a strong hunch it's going to be a shooting edition.
It's true. That's definitely what we've seen. I'm a melee person, but we're gonna figure it out, guys. It's gonna be okay.
Yeah. The next one is that you could put any unit in reserve now.
Yes.
Now, in practice, we haven't found this to be that effective.
Right.
Because the board's smaller and it's easier to screen out, and these have to come in from the flanks.
That's right.
But if you have a key model, thinking like a Magnus Mortarion that previously could get shot off turn 1, you could keep it safe for longer.
That's right, and this is actually related to kind of a subpoint regarding who actually goes first, right? Again, in ITC towards the end of this last kind of mid-season, it was you really knew who was going to go first with a complete certitude, and that made you deploy a certain way.
Right.
Now, you have no idea. It's a roll-off, doesn't matter how many
random
units.
roll-off, no sees the initiative.
So in that case, if you bring Morty or something to like a mega gun line and you just can't afford it, I'm going to spend 3 CB to have him do something, right?
Yeah.
So it is a big change, but as we found, you know, deep striking is harder with a smaller board.
Right.
And a lot of the armies that wanted to do it already could, right?
Yes.
And you'll see those armies can still do it for cheaper.
Yeah.
So you haven't lost your uniqueness.
Okay, well, the next one is a change to the way charging works.
Yeah.
Previously, you could declare a charge at every unit within 12 inches, and you only had to make it to 1.
Right.
Now, they've made it so that you have to reach every single unit you declared against, or the charge is failed. This might seem subtle, but it radically changes assault armies.
It's so punishing, and it makes screens infinitely more valuable, right? Even a 3-inch charge to a 5-inch charge, there are a decent amount of odds that you're not rolling that 5, you're failing it, and so those screens become very, very powerful. It also becomes tough for armies that want to double fight, right?
Correct.
You know, play orcs, demons, things like that. You pile in, you berserkers, you try to do like a wide flank, go into something else, wipe them. You can't do that anymore. It's very, very punishing for melee armies.
Yeah, now they've offset this a little bit by taking away Overwatch, which is a big thing that, that kind of came out from that, but really, that's more a change to speed up the game. You're seeing thematically, everything wants the game to be faster, right? 5 turns. We're actually going to go through many points that all make the game faster, but those are generally big things there. So the next change we want to go over is that vehicles and monsters move and shoot, or really anything without the infantry keyword.
That's right.
Moves and shoots with heavy, but vehicles and monsters in particular can shoot in combat.
This is huge. 8th edition unfortunately saw a vast decline in a lot of kind of tanks that you could use, or if you did use them, they were very static. They would sit and shoot. If they got tagged, that was game over. You know, looking at Castellan robots, for example.
Yeah.
And this is a huge, huge change to things that are flexible, right? So things that are fast, that didn't want to get tagged, and things that can also function both in melee and in shooting.
That's right. Yeah, so this idea now, I think, between the idea that you have more line of sight, more room to shoot, already making it a shooting edition, tanks already had the best guns, and the main thing mitigating them was the fact that they often didn't move and shoot.
Right.
And then the fact that they were so easy to tag, you never even had to kill them, all that's gone now. I think we're going to see a huge resurgence in vehicles, especially early in the meta. We're probably going to see an ebb and flow in this for the next little while because people will tech towards tank killing, and then all of a sudden people will tech towards MSU of like a bunch of guardsmen or something.
Right.
But I think initially people are going to be really excited to bring those vehicles to the table, and their monsters in particular.
That's right. And one thing to keep in mind too is it's not really a universal buff to all tanks and monsters. If you have your quad las cannons and you get touched by 4 guardsmen, you're still in trouble. You're still wasting those las cannons.
Yeah.
So in particular, we're looking for things that have mass shots that can do a lot of kind of DACA.
Particularly things without that blast rule. Things that, if you haven't seen the blast rule, it's going to give you that ability to get maximum shots against a unit of 11 plus, or a minimum of 3 against anything 6 plus.
Yeah.
And that's a good rule unto itself. It's okay. It hurts Horde armies, but it doesn't allow you to shoot in combat. So if you have that Lehman Russ with a battle cannon, which I believe is blast, that one's not going to allow you to shoot in combat. So there's still some tanks that are susceptible.
That's right.
What I'm particularly excited about here are the vehicles or monsters that want to fight and shoot.
Yeah,
Think of the Dreadnoughts, the Carnifex, pretty much everything in the Tyranid range, right? These are going to be vastly more interesting. So I'm really into this.
Absolutely. So there's another major change to the pacing of scoring in this game.
Yeah, this one's great.
Currently, especially again, if you play ITC, you could kind of throw units onto objectives, score something, they die, it's fine. But now your primary objectives are scored at the start of your command phase, excluding turn 1.
That's right.
So there's a couple big changes, right? You don't really score those points you don't score those points turn 1, and it means you have to not only get on a point, you have to actually hold it until your next turn.
So it really makes it important that you get durable units. Before, you used to have things like a 10-man guard squad. It would run, move, jump and get on an objective, score you that point. You could still do that to score some secondary objectives, but for the primary, that's just not going to work. They get on that objective, they're going to get blasted off, they're not durable enough, they're not going to be able to hide. And so you're going to have to change the way you score objectives, and that's the heart of the game. So it's really going to change the kind of units that you go and grab objectives.
This is a massive change that really changes the pacing of how you play, that you might not even realize it until you get to the table and you say, oh, all these assumptions that I make because of the way I play are the opposite. And screening's out the door. We reverse our screening in a lot of cases. It makes for some crazy combinations that you would have never seen before.
Absolutely. Now, another one, and this one is pretty subtle. Many of you might have missed it if you're looking at previews, is one of the most important stratagems in all of 40K. It's command reroll.
Yes.
Right? You just pick a dice, you reroll it for 1 CP. Many of you have probably used this stratagem more than any other stratagem by a factor of 5. Used it almost every turn. Now, they've subtly rewritten it. Command reroll can only be used on certain kinds of rolls, in particular your main rolls like hit, wound, damage, save. And it's also been changed that it rerolls not a single dice, but an entire roll. So, for instance, if you're using it on a charge, instead of it being reroll one of the 2 dice, you're rerolling both. This is massive hit to combat armies who wanted to make that 9-inch charge from Deep Strike. And there's more things coming in from reserve now. And you roll that 6 and you roll a 1. Now you have to reroll the 6 and the 1.
It takes away a lot of that flexibility. Of course, things like Gaze of Fate become more useful, but you think about all those kind of random D6s that were very important to your army. You know, Cult Ambush, things like that.
Gilliman getting back up from death. You can't even reroll that now.
You can't. That's right. Yeah, poor Gilliman. So this is actually a massive thing, and looking at your army to consider how that's going to affect it, because it's all these like weird things of like, oh yeah, I did rely on this one reroll that like doubles the odds of something important happening.
What this does is, if you've ever noticed, the command reroll takes a lot of the randomness out of the game. And if you've played a game like even Age of Sigmar, it's an extremely random game, very random game. And this starts to pull some of those things towards that. Like if you've got a knight that explodes on a 4-up. You can't reroll that now. And now those are big swing moments that are based on the luck of the dice. It's actually subtly a really big change that I think most people aren't going to really appreciate until they get to the table.
That's right. So another big change, especially if you play competitively in casual games, this wasn't as common. You would use the classic tri-point, right? You would get 3 models around another enemy model. They wouldn't actually physically be able to move unless they could fly over the your units, and you would trap them. Now, of course, there's a breakout stratagem. You can escape. And again, unfortunately, this is a big hit for melee armies, right? This was the thing that you needed it wasn't always about killing, right? You could kill stuff, but you would sort of tag their line, finish fighting during the opponent's turn, and then next turn you're in their field. You were invincible, pretty much gone unless you can magically get multiple tri-points.
This was the way to survive a pure combat army against a pure shooting army. It was unnecessary. But it was also so powerful in those matchups that it often was an instant win if you got it once. And it sometimes was a feel bad for people because you had a lot of people arguing over, oh, did I make the tri-point? Can I pile in this way? Can I pile in that way? And it was a moment of contention, and so I'm actually glad it's out of the game to some extent. But it does hit combat armies. Now, you could say, yes, this army still gets hurt when they fall back. There's new stratagems to hurt them when they fall back. It doesn't matter. When you're wrapping a guard squad, you weren't trying to protect the guards. You weren't trying to kill the guard squad. You're trying to protect your own squad.
Exactly.
And so they didn't offset it with a new stratagem to improve your durability.
No.
So this is another hit to melee armies, which, as you can see, there's quite a few in here. The next one, and this is really one of the last big changes, is the idea that when you're building your army roster, you have to pick your psychic powers, your warlord traits, your relics, even your stratagems to upgrade for more relics, more psychic powers. If you have a knight and a chaos knight and you want to upgrade it to a dreadblade, or you want to try and pick one of the vows for it, any of these things, you have to do them all on your data sheet before you get to the table. This is monumental.
It's huge, and unfortunately, it makes people sort of tend towards certain averages, things that are the best all-comers. It makes things kind of more skewy, right? It's whatever you came to the table with, and there's less decisions to be made beforehand. Now, I will say, it means the pregame will go much faster. That's a huge part of the game right now.
This is another idea that makes the game shorter.
That's entirely what that decision is about.
Right. This makes the game shorter, but we would argue it also removes quite a bit of the skill. This was one of the hardest phases of the game. That you see your opponent's army and you know, I have these 6, 7, increasingly so, like 10 command points I could spend pre-game, and I'm customize my army for yours. Now, this did give an unfair advantage to the armies that have this, that don't. Right? Space Marines can do this like crazy. AdMech can do this now like crazy. There's probably only 4 or 5 factions that could do it really hardcore. It did give them a huge advantage.
That is. That's right. And it's strange because this new one very much tends towards competitive metas. Right. We'll say I'm running against. There's a lot of people that run Psychers locally, so I'm going to take Impregnable Mind on my Custodies captain, and things like that. That it's kind of weird and it gets out of the game. So you know.
So one of the things also with that is that there's these niche warlord traits or relics. And you would pick them in situational matchups. Now, because you have to pick it before, you're just never going to pick them. So unfortunately, fewer of your relics and fewer of your warlord traits are going to get used as normal.
It's a shame.
Yeah, it is a shame, but it's okay. So another change, and actually as a Tau player, I really appreciate this one, is that they've capped the hit and wound at +1 or -1. This is kind of a big change for the game.
It's a very big deal. Now, we will say that it is still cumulative, right? If you get +2 to hit and you're shooting at something with -1 to hit, you are able to negate it and turn it back to a +1. So you do something. Those strats aren't completely gone. But the not capping out, one thing that does is it gets rid of complete skew lists, right? It gets rid of those -3 to hit Eldar flyers, gets rid of the Possess Bomb. It's all those crazy builds.
And those were feel-bad armies. So I'm super glad those are gone. But now what it means is you've got these weird situations where I've got that flyer at the other end of the table. I've got a guy with an assault combi weapon. And now he's going to advance, shoot both profiles on the combi weapon at your plane. He would normally be at -3. He's at -1. And so you have these things that all of a sudden gained a lot of efficiency just because they've capped that. Now, the wound modifier isn't as common, right? There's fewer armies, right? We were talking about earlier, Death Guard have it. Obviously, Salamanders have it. There isn't too many armies with multiple pluses to wound, so that's not as big. But the pluses to hit, it's actually a big game changer.
It really is. It really is. So another change, if you haven't noticed already, the game is only 5 turns. We're in Sigmar land now. And this has some massive impacts. Obviously,
it's huge.
Games will be faster. That can be interesting, but it also really changes the pacing, right? So remember, you don't really have to engage on turn 1, maybe even turn 2 in some cases, but the game does end sooner, right? So this, go ahead.
Not only does it make the game faster, which is part of that key theme, and the game, as we said, as you're saying, first turn isn't really part of it. So the game is kind of, in many times, it's 4 turns. Like you might find a couple of the games we've played, our first turn was like a minute. It was like, okay, my first turn, I move this 1 unit, your turn. And so it's really a 4-turn game in sometimes, and I think that that's a massive change to armies that wanted to play in the late game. I'm thinking of the durable armies like the Death Guard or like my Tau. Those armies really wanted to survive late game and go big. So it's a kind of a big change to them.
It really is. It really is. So the other thing is blast weapons, of course. This is a really weird one because based off the weapons that they've released, the way that it works, it's not necessarily something we see people teching into. Because against like average squads, 5 or 6 man, 10 versus 11, it's not that monumental a difference. But against hordes, it's huge, right? So for example, there's like 3 armies that really want to take these big units, right? Orcs, demons, and Nids.
Tyranids,
They really care about having 20+ models in those units, and they are hit so massively by this change.
Yeah, pretty much everyone else who used to have a 12-person squad or
Yeah.
15-person squad can easily take them back down to 10
Yeah.
without much of a miss. So having the 6+ for the minimum 3, this is only going to work on D3 weapons. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
It's only when you're getting maximum shots. So it's only when a unit is that 11+. And just to clear up any confusion, if you have something like a Wyvern,
sure,
it's 4d6 shots.
Yep.
If you're shooting at a 6-man squad, you can get a minimum 3,
right,
which is less than you could roll if you rolled it. If you rolled 4 1s, you'd still have 4 shots instead of 3. So unless you're shooting at an 11+ squad, you're not really getting any advantage for this, right?
No, especially because in those cases you're also getting rerolls, things like that, that don't factor into just taking that kind of set number of shots.
Yeah, so this is a punishment to hordes, but hordes get buffs because the mission works better for them.
That's right.
That idea of holding. So everything is an ebb and flow here. Yes, this hurts hordes, but I think hordes actually get more than they lose most of the time.
The other thing about blasts and hordes is, of course, blasts can't be shot in combat, even if you're a tank. So that, of course, is good for all those armies that I mentioned that actually do want to tag, and suddenly tagging matters a lot.
Exactly.
You know, touching that Wyvern is like still excellent, right?
Yeah, it's such a trade-off. Another big thing is the smaller board. Now, we were just cutting our mat a few minutes ago because we're playing a game tonight. And so we actually are going to be playing with the smaller board. We think vastly the entire community is going to be playing with it.
Yeah.
So we think it's actually a really big change. And what it does is it means that in many cases the game is faster because we get into each other a lot quicker.
Yep.
It also means those armies that wanted to backline and really keep you at bay, they really can't do it as long because that deployment zone is quite a bit smaller.
You really can't. There's nowhere to hide. The game is really played in the midboard now. You don't have to be diving into the enemy territory, even though you could much easier now.
Yeah.
Because of the new missions, this board size actually works pretty well. It's been interesting.
And it's not just the primary objectives where you need to hold the board, it's also the secondaries.
Right, right.
So no longer can you build a gun line that just hangs out back in your corner and win.
Nope.
You cannot do that. If you do that for 3 turns, you've almost certainly lost the game.
Right.
So you can't afford to be playing that game. You've got to come up. You've got to battle for the center. And the smaller board really helps you do that. It also, obviously, ranges didn't decrease. So any of these armies that had those mid-range guns, they're now really threatening most of the board. So that's another plus for shooting armies.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So one thing that's great for monsters, dreadnoughts, things like that, is you can now have a 5-inch vertical engagement range.
Yeah.
No more running to the second floor, hiding from thunderwolves, things like that. 5 inches is a lot, and we found on most terrain you can't really escape from these things anymore.
Yeah.
Which is great. That was another feel bad moment that just was very non-narrative and kind of silly. But the secret change that happens in all of this is the changes to charge ranges, right?
Yeah.
You're basically getting 5 inches less. You have to be able to charge up. You just have to get below them. So that is one good thing we can say about melee, right?
Yeah, hiding on a second floor no longer provides much of a charge deterrent. In fact, in many cases, it actually could be a disadvantage because you could get these weird things where I charge and I'm underneath you, and I can get more models in combat than I might have been able to otherwise.
Yeah, totally.
Or I might be able to charge something behind a unit easier.
Right.
And so being on a second floor, if you're trying to be the defensive unit, might actually be a huge disadvantage. So that's a big change. I love it because I love those dreadnoughts fighting up. I love those bikers fighting up now. This is all really good. I'm really happy about that. So this next change, also a very big change. And I think this is going to shake up the game a lot, which is the new character targeting rule. If you haven't seen it, you need to be within 3 inches of a unit with at least 3 or more models.
Yep.
Or next to a vehicle or monster. And this is a massive shift because characters were the heart of 40K.
Absolutely, and it really changes the way that we played things. And when 8th edition came out, everyone thought the character rule was very strange, but we've adapted and we have all these strategies where we'll have a character that's kind of back by themselves on an objective, but they're safe because you have some scout squad or the rest of your army.
You've got a company commander back here holding the objective. That can't happen anymore.
You can't do that anymore. Yeah. And also, even if you have a squad that they're with, this means that squad can get gunned down, right? I played a game with Bridger, and I was running AdMech, and I said, so there's 3 characters next to all those intercessors? He said, yeah, sure. And I was able to gun them down enough that I got those points right away on the character.
And that's the thing, you don't even have to kill the whole squad. You just have to kill it down to 2.
Right, right.
As soon as you kill it down to 2, they're not blocking anymore.
Right.
Right? And so you need to rethink it. Not only do you get less HQ slots with the new detachments, but those HQs are less durable.
They're more vulnerable.
And so in many ways, I actually think this nerfs snipers. Because the easiest way to snipe now is to just blast through their screen.
Right.
Because there's so much less screen to kill most of the time. And so that's probably the better tactic. And also it nerfs characters enough that people are probably going to take fewer than they did before.
Yeah.
Not least of which because they don't need the battalions.
And it's much more narrative. At the end of the day, this feels like it keeps the spirit of the character rule, right? It's a simplified version of kind of joining units if you're familiar with older Warhammer. But it's more narratively strong. It was kind of weird before. It always bothered me.
So the next one is a change to coherency, and this is if you're a larger unit, 6+, then you need to keep coherency with at least 2 other models.
That's right.
Now, you might have seen a bit online. There is some sacred geometry you can create so you can still string out, but you're taking a risk because this interacts with a new rule that if you're out of coherency, you have to kill models until you get into coherency.
That's right. And if you've been playing Sigmar for a while, you're familiar with this rule, and you've seen how it has drastically impacted them. You can daisy chain. There are some advantages to still doing that to an extent, but you're taking a risk, right?
It's a big risk.
It's a huge, huge risk. And so I'm excited to see all the different positioning that happens. We're talking about different triangles and having fallback triangles. That's a whole nother thing to learn about.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good thing. It's going to make it...
We're definitely going to show you some tactics on how to make it work.
Right.
I'm really excited for the first time a Death Jester gets to just pick the model and wipe like half a squad.
So good.
These are going to be great. But making this work is actually really interesting because if you're paying attention, you could have a unit of 10 or 12, and you could have them in such a way that they're strung out.
Yeah.
But then when you start pulling models, you pull down to the point where you get to 6 models.
That's right.
And then you're fine, right?
Yeah. Oh, 5.
Or 5, yeah, 5 models, and then you're fine. And so you could be very clever about the placement. And this is one of those places where a very skilled player is going to eke out an advantage over a more casual player.
We had some long discussions on
that
that one.
if you master this placement of these models, you could do more with your models than most people will be able to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is a big one. So the next one has to do with morale.
Yeah.
And I think morale's changed quite a bit. Now, if you, at the end of your turn, if you're going to take a morale test, you roll 2d6, add the amount that you've killed, and then 1 model flees.
Right.
So that already is great. You're losing far fewer. Then you take an attrition test, which is rolling a dice for every model in the unit. And if on a 1 they flee, and if you've lost more than half the unit, I think they flee on a 1 or 2.
Yeah, it increases.
And this ultimately, although it's a little more complicated, it actually means less models flee to morale than they did before.
Yeah, morale's always a tough mechanic to implement in games, and this is a much less punishing one that actually ended up punishing a lot of big hordes, right? Especially things like demons. And so it's much less harsh. It does mean, though, if you have a small squad and you only lose a little bit, then it's still possible you can lose the last guy.
Yeah.
The other thing is that 1 always succeeds. So you can have that moment of just insane bravery, which is great and narrative and fun. And it's still dice game. We like those epic moments to actually happen, right?
Yeah.
Before it's like, well, I'm just dead, right?
That's right. Speaking of insane bravery, there is still the stratagem for it, but they actually moved it to once per game, which is actually, it's subtle little changes like this that are going to trip people up for months. I'm sure they'll trip us up for months as well. But yeah, just really big change to this way that this morale works. But I like it better. This is a thing that's helped the hordes when there's been a few other things that have hurt them. So I think that's a pretty big one. Another one we want to talk about is, in general, there's more interactions with terrain, right? And one of them is, of course, that you have things like dense cover, which is a -1 to hit. These are coming from things like woods or the AdMech structures. But you also have heavy cover, which gives you the ability to get a plus save in combat. And then you also have the ability for infantry, when they're inside of this area terrain, to set to defend, giving them the ability to 5-up Overwatch or a +1 to hit. It's actually a lot more interactions with terrain in general.
It really is. And this was something that was kind of controversial when GW released it. Everyone's like, it's so complicated. It does seem more complicated at first, but let me reassure you that it actually is much more intuitive. It is kind of a way of building on the terrain rules that we're already used to.
That's right.
And making them better. So I love the new forest rules. That's dense cover. It always was weird to me that a tree was just as protective as a ruin, right? And it's like, no, it's not. One is more, you're more hidden, right? And the mechanic is terrain actually being usable, giving the -1 with having to say, these are ruins or whatever. These are great changes. They make for more decisions on the battlefield.
It gives more personality to the different terrain pieces. In general, your terrain's going to work better on the board. So I think I'm interested in that. But in general, the terrain has less of a heavy impact on the game than it used to. Despite the fact that it has so many more abilities, the impact it has on the game is probably a little less.
It's less of an all or nothing thing, despite what it looks like when you first read it.
One of the next things is many of the objectives revolve around taking actions. These are secondary objectives where you have to be in range of a particular part of the board or a particular objective or a particular enemy unit like a character, and you could take an action, but taking an action replaces your ability to shoot, fight, do psychic. You can't do an action if you advanced. I think even if you fell back, you can't do an action. And actions are a big part of the game, and they're changed quite a bit.
They're really interesting. They're not easy to do. Really, Games Workshop has tried to reduce any of the kind of weird shenanigans that really don't feel right if you think about it. And so this is a new thing that we'll have to kind of play around with. It can be extremely powerful. But again, we're coming back to this idea that you have to be able to get on an objective and actually defend it and hold it, right? That's going to be just as important for your units that hop on something, perform an action, whatever it may be, right? There's going to be lots of different types of ones.
Yeah, so this last one we want to talk about is a change to the fly keyword.
That's right.
Which is the ultimate keyword in 8th edition. It's a keyword. It's a keyword that dominated 8th edition. And because it allowed you to do everything, right? Early in the edition, it allowed you to charge over terrain and models, and then it allows you to fall back and shoot. It gives you a ton of mobility. Yeah. Of course, they curbed that a little bit, but still, it is the dominant keyword in 8th edition, and they've really pared it back at the start of 9th.
They've hit it very, very hard. It was funny because this was announced at the same time that you were talking about Tau getting Overwatch, and everyone was like, yay! But also fly doesn't work. Oh,
yeah, that's right. I tried to put those both in the same article, so to kind of... It's a roller coaster of emotion, but it's a trade-off.
It's rough, Ryan. That's rough. Yeah. But yeah, this is a huge, huge change. Absolutely, I would say that it was too powerful of a keyword.
Yeah.
It's still great because you can move over things, but you can't fall back and shoot. And so this is one small hit to shooting armies. You're going to have to be more careful with the things that get touched that are not vehicles, right? So like crisis suits, a lot of Eldar stuff. Things like that are going to have to be more careful. And overall, I think the game will be much better for it.
Yeah, I think Tau is the single most heavy hit army from this.
Yeah.
Almost every model on the board had fly, and they all only shot.
Right.
So losing that is really big. And as you point out, some of the army is still fine. They'll still shoot in combat. They'll still be dangerous.
Yeah.
Those crisis suits are the perfect unit in the middle that got nothing.
Yep.
Sorry. So in order to work with your crisis suits, you're going to have to be so much more careful about how you protect them.
Yeah.
And so we're going to have to learn some new tactics. But hey, we're going to be playing some Tau tonight.
That's right.
We're going to be talking about some tactics, so you're not going to want to miss that. Okay, so those were the big changes that we wanted to go through.
Yep.
If there's any questions, we'd be happy to take some of them.
We have questions.
Open the floodgates.
We've been playing the game for a while now, so happy to.
We have a lot of questions.
All right, let's hear it.
Let's start out with: do we have a set release schedule? Ooh.
Ooh. Oh, thank you. Yeah, so we were actually planning to start this release next week. Of course, many of you might know there's been a lot of leaks. Shame on you, leakers. So we've had to move up our schedule. Yeah. So we're gonna put out a post tomorrow in most places. You'll see it on our social feed, so come check that out. And we'll probably post it here in YouTube. And we'll show you our release schedule week by week. But we have 4 weeks of content where we have a video every single day for the next roughly 30 days.
That's right.
It's actually a little more than 30 days. And we're going to be doing a battle report almost every day next week. Basically every day starting from Saturday. We're going to be doing a battle report every day almost. And then going forward, we're going to do 2 or 3 a week.
That's right. We want to do as massive coverage as possible. We're going to hit almost every single army, especially the ones that we're going to be showing actual battle reports, following up on them. We've been so excited for this. So yeah, there will be a release schedule very soon, and it is ridiculously aggressive.
Yeah, you can expect us to cover everything. Of course, as you saw, GW previewed 2 new books. We've got the GT book and another one. I forget what they called it. But as soon as those drop and there's the content from them, new points, changes, etc. We'll be in here covering that. Second the next codexes drop, we'll be in there doing really in-depth coverage. So tons of stuff, and we'll be posting it tomorrow once we've worked it all out.
Another softball here. Biggest winners and losers. I know we're going to do a video on this.
Yeah.
But let's just get like a quick 30-second answer.
Admech, what?
Yeah, so yes, we do have a video coming on the 5 biggest winners and losers.
Yeah, it's coming.
But in general, put it this way, the armies that shoot exceptionally well, especially the armies that shot really, really well with vehicles, are getting an enormous increase. Probably our biggest pick is the Custodies, the Admech. I'm mentioning the Custodies because also armies that got a ton of CP that didn't have them, like the Custodies, are also big winners. So I think the Custodies are up there for one of the biggest winners. The Admech is another one. Biggest losers, this is a more bummer thing to talk about. And honestly, I think we need to play this out before we get too difficult, but I'll name a few.
Sure.
The Knights.
Yep.
The Knights got hit because of the mission.
Yeah.
And the missions are so much harder for Knights to complete, the secondaries, etc. In addition to that, if they want to tech into getting support, they need to pay CP, which they need that CP. Yeah. They had so many pre-game things they can do, which they can't really do anymore. And not to mention, the whole game is probably going to be better prepared to kill vehicles.
That's right.
And so everyone's got those tank-killing guns, which really hurts Knights. So I think Knights is one of the worst hit factions.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people out there might be thinking Tau is also really heavy hit. But I think that's only if you keep thinking of them the same way you wanted to.
It's a horizontal move.
Because it is a shooting edition, there's very few people that outshoot them. So I think it became more of a thinking man's army, which is great, but it's still super strong. So I'm not going to call them a big loser. So it's really Knights on the bottom end. Custodies and Admech are big winners.
Other losers would be anything that doesn't have the shooting, and also possibly doesn't have the ability to hold the board, right? There are certain armies or strategies within armies, really, that wanted to pop on objectives, charge from out of line of sight, hold things, die, things like that. You can't really do that anymore. So I don't know that there's that many big losers, but there's definitely tactics that are not nearly as good
There's
anymore.
army lists that are wholly not viable anymore.
Keep your mind open. It's a new edition. You're going to have to fundamentally change some of these armies.
You're going to have to dig deep in your codex and try things you didn't try before. So yeah, certain list builds are huge losers. Like there's certain builds of like Genestealer cults that are just absolutely not going to work. But there's other ways to play them that are probably going to work pretty well.
Exactly.
All right, next we have, I'm going to call it a batch of questions.
Okay.
That are things that clearly need to be FAQ'd soon. And we'll just get them all out of the way real quick.
Right.
All right.
Well, this is, I can personally say as a perspective as a playtester, these rules, writing all these rules is an enormous effort. And if you find a handful of mistakes in these books, that is a miracle that there's only a handful of mistakes. This is so complicated to do. But yes, there are things that need to be fixed. I assure you the playtest team is aware of them and that facts will be coming for them. So if you see something that's obviously broken, don't assume it's going to stay, right? You don't have 2+ invulnerable saves across armies. You know, there's a whole bunch of things that you're not going to be able to do, and they're going to be fixed. They're just oversights.
Yeah, and
so
we will
under that umbrella. We have smiting multiple times in a turn with the same model. We have
that's not going to happen.
1+ saves that are basically 2+ invulnerable saves. There's a whole bunch. There's a whole bunch of these questions.
All of them that seem obvious, they're not going to happen. They're going to get fixed.
And we will not be playing them as such, right? And
yeah,
if
we're not
obviously
a
mistake or obviously wrong. We're not going to be playing that with that because we want our content to be useful beyond the first day when they fix these things.
You shouldn't play that way either. It's abusive. It's not fun.
It's not.
I can't tell you when the fact is going to come, but it'll come and it'll be fine. Just don't play that way today.
Okay. There are also questions of normalizing changes that we've seen in the box. So we've seen Storm Shields do something different on the new data sheet.
That's a good question.
We've seen Plasma does something different on the new data sheet.
Cool.
Are these rules going to apply to everything else that has those things?
No idea. I have no idea. So yeah, there's a change to the Storm Shield in there. Obviously, if that applied across all of Space Marines, or even worse, all of the whole game, it'd be a dramatic change. Storm Shield's a core piece. I have no idea how that's going to play out.
Yeah, I don't know, especially with the way that it's written, the units that it's on. There's actually no way to know. And we've seen this before, right? They've had kind of these individual boxes that have kind of different rules, things like that. So it would be interesting. It'd be a big change.
I'll tell you this. I've asked for clarification already, and so we'll see.
Right.
Now, as far as the plasma keyword, that's the same thing. I just don't know. In general, when they have rules like that, there's always one or two ways you can interpret it. It's like, oh, they wrote it differently unintentionally, or this is the way they'd like it to be going forward.
Right.
At this point, I'd say with the Storm Shield, it feels like that's probably how they want it to be going. The Plasma, we've seen them flip-flop on this before. Even with the Psychic Awakening for Tau, they had it one way and not, and they,
Oh yeah, which they also fixed.
They fixed, right?
So absolutely, I would not say, okay, well now my Custodian guards have like these Storm Shields or anything like that.
Don't do that.
Extrapolate anything.
More than anything, probably stay with the data sheets you have. That's the easiest way to play for now until there's clarification.
All right. Also, we want to apologize. I know a lot of you have seen our Space Marine video. We made a mistake. We said you could take Thunderhammers on Assault Intercessors.
I kind of assumed they
We
did,
just assumed you could.
but,
Yeah, we didn't look at that. We have the box. We didn't actually look in it.
Yeah.
We just assumed, because here's the thing. We were test playing that list for a little while.
Yeah.
And we were really excited about this White Scars list. And every time we didn't have it with Thunderhammers, and then we kept losing.
Well, and the thing was, too, we had this discussion around, like, oh, well, Knights are really bad. Or, like, what would Knights do well against? And you're like, actually, you know what? Knights would do really well against our Assault Intercessor list.
And
we're
like,
let's just put Thunderhammers in there.
So, yeah, whatever. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
We mixed up.
It's still good, though. It's still minus
it's still
two,
good
two
list.
It's just you may want to take something else to kill tanks.
Yeah.
Awesome. Have we play tested all of the armies or just some? This is a good question.
Not quite all of them.
I wish I could say that.
But I'd say, I don't know how many factions there are, like 30-ish, 32-ish. It depends if you count sub-factions, right? I think it feels like we've gone fairly deep on about 20.
We've been playing a ton. Like yesterday or 2 days ago, we played three games in that day. We've been playing lots and lots, variations on them. It is ridiculous, and we're still playing multiple games.
Yeah, these guys in the studio have been test playing for about a week since we got the preview rules. I've been playtesting for about 8 months, and so in that time I've tried a lot of different stuff.
Yeah.
But I've only, you only have so much time to go deep on certain armies, so we've looked at about 20 of them in depth. And those are the 20 that we have faction-focused videos coming out for. You've seen the Tau and Space Marine videos that we have on our channel today.
Yeah.
We've already filmed another 16 or so, 16, 17, that are going to be coming out over the next, we're going to trickle them out basically one every 2 days, every day or so.
That's right.
All right, another great question. How have airplanes changed? And there's so many different directions we could go here.
Yeah. More than anything, they haven't changed, in my opinion. Yeah. There's little changes to their rules, but I actually think it has a negligible impact. So they can fly off the board and come back in another turn.
Yep.
Like, who cares? When they fly off the board, it means you didn't shoot with them that turn. So you just lost them for a turn. Okay, a good plane player never found that they were flying off the board.
Right.
That was never really a problem.
Flying off is not as interesting to me.
Now, the other problem with planes is, okay, so they don't grab your objectives and things. They didn't do that already.
No.
Their base doesn't count, and you can walk them. That's already a rule that we have.
All the same.
So there is a lot of little clarifications and adjustments, but as far as how they're going to play on the battlefield, I'm not really...
Well, there's one big change, Brian.
You think it's huge? Okay.
Most planes have heavy guns. And they were pointed or
Yes.
balanced around.
I see.
Having one less ballistic skill.
That's
than
a little
they
different.
have.
That's vehicles at large, right? And so you do have a ton of planes that didn't have the machine spirit equivalent.
Yep.
And now they're functionally hitting on twos.
That's right.
Like you've got like even Tau Tiger Sharks and Barracudas and all kinds of factions.
Non-Iron Hand Storm Talons are also really exciting, right? Crimson Hunter Exarchs.
Yeah.
I'm going to be taking the 5-up invuln.
Crimson Hunter Exarchs are great.
I wouldn't want to spend a slot on that.
So yeah, planes got a bit of a nerf in the sense that they don't have as many minuses to hit. But yeah, the fact that they all move and shoot without penalty, that's a huge buff. They're one of the main classes of vehicles that benefit the most.
Yeah, it's good. And we're seeing this flattening of things, right? There's no extremes of -3 to hit planes that are invincible, blah blah blah.
But if we're right and people tech for vehicle killing, your planes are going to drop.
They're so gone because they can also never hide.
And they're paper thin. They can't hide and they're paper thin. So good and bad.
Along the same lines, there's a question about pluses and minuses capping at 1, cumulatively or balancing each other out. If I have a plane that's -1 to hit, you use a stratagem to give yourself +1 to hit. Can I then lightning fast to go back to -1?
Oh, the order?
Is that
like
how it's
when which they're declared, or the one they stack in?
Do they interact?
They do interact. They do interact.
Have to.
Yeah, so they are cumulative like that.
Yeah.
So if your plane is -2 and I am +1, I'm still -1.
Yeah. If they didn't stack, I'm not even sure how that would work.
They do stack. They do stack. Definitively, they do stack.
Yeah.
Now, as far as you gave a very specific situation of the order of operations, the book, and I don't want to quote it right now because it's very technical.
They do specify.
They do specify that I think stratagems have to happen at around the same time, and where there's clarification. You should look in the book for ordering of operations. It doesn't quite have like a Magic the Gathering stack, but they're getting closer.
It's much better. I remember when you saw that.
They're getting closer.
Yes, thank you.
Brett's in the chat. Hi, Brett.
Hey, Brett.
Hey.
He asks, is anything going to change for the jetpack or jump pack keyword?
No.
Specifically that?
Nothing that's been shown so far, and nothing that we can talk about for sure.
Yeah. It's something that a lot of Tau players care about because once upon a time
they used to jump, shoot, jump.
Jump, shoot, jump. No, this game is about interaction now.
So the Tau, the crisis suits are harder to play. They used to like come down, just completely obliterate, and then be invincible for a turn or two, which cool if you're a Tau player. But now you're gonna have to be a lot more careful with them. What I'm finding is that putting longer range weapons on them, like missile pods,
instead of ions,
is far more interesting with them because you want to keep them out of easy charge range.
Well, and missile pods are long range now, right?
Yeah, 36 and 36 is good. So don't be coming down with a bunch of flamers or a bunch of
that can't stand on the objective.
Yeah, that's right.
So
just think about being longer range and more safe in general.
Okay, so there's another question: farming more than 1 CP in a turn. This we've seen the basic rules. They're available on the Warhammer community site.
Totally.
But this is slightly changed and in a way that might not be intuitive. You can only get back 1 CP a turn now. So if you have the Moment Shackle, and this was an example specifically brought up, you spend 3 CP, you get D3 back. It's capped at 1 now.
I have a hunch this is an incorrect that thing that will be fixed. I remember looking at something earlier in the playtesting that wasn't like this, and so I'm gonna have to see if this is one of those things we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, because I mean,
doesn't seem intuitive.
Even previously, these were sort of an exception to the rule, so it's one of those things that's very easy to sort of leave out. So I mean, it is what it is for now, but yeah, it seems like that could be kind of off.
The existing match play rules that GW released had an addendum that called out the Moment Shackle, and it called out the Player of Twilight or whatever, the Harlequin one, right?
The Tallyman.
And the Tallyman. So I think maybe those just didn't make it in. If that is their intention to flatten that out, okay, sure. That's not my understanding. I thought you'd still get that. So I think here in the studio, we're going to play that those abilities still grant you back your full CP.
Yeah.
And we'll wait for a fact on that.
Yep. Awesome. Boots on the ground. Is it gone? Did we get rid of it?
I didn't see it in the book. So as far as getting tabled, is that the idea that you're getting tabled? Yeah, I don't think that's there.
So there's two components to boots on the ground.
Yeah.
One is that flyers don't score objectives, which is in 9th.
I think they don't score objectives.
Correct.
And the other half is if you run out of units that are not flyers, you lose.
No, I don't think that's there anymore. At least I didn't see it. And that's because flyers are no longer that abusive.
Yeah.
If you've seen, the flyers don't have the minuses.
Yeah.
The flyers also they don't score or anything like that.
Right.
And it's harder to get flyer battlefield slots. There's no air wing detachment.
There's less detachments, so.
Right.
Yeah.
And you don't even have the air wing detachment anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I don't think they're going to be as abusive.
Well, and as far as like, oh, can I get tabled and still win the game? I mean, I think once you guys start playing, you'll see if you can do that, all the more power to you. That's how it works in Sigmar, right?
Yeah.
If you got tabled and you have all the points, then you won the day.
Yeah,
right?
I'm into it. Yeah,
it's
so
cool.
I don't think that's
It's not as crazy as it thinks.
Yeah.
All right, great. +1 and ×2 strength.
Right.
The ordering has kind of changed. Now, technically, it hasn't. There was just a weird loophole in 8th that made plus go before times.
Yes.
But now, GW has officially clarified.
Which is great.
Right.
You add strength before you double. There's only really a few cases in the game where this is going to change everything.
There's like 4 situations where it just changes the math, and it might make you a little less strong.
Yeah.
But you're still going to be plenty strong. If you're times tuning, plussing anything, you're strong. You're fine.
The important thing is that we have a clear answer finally, because it was always like, can't I, if it's a spell versus an ability. Right. It's like, let's just be glad that it's clear.
Yeah.
Excellent. With the super heavy Ox nerfed in that it both costs command points and no
doesn't get chapter tactics.
How will Storm Surges and Wraith Knights ever exist in 9th edition?
Yeah. So
good question.
Take 3. I personally am building 2 Storm Surges and a Towner right now. There's a detachment, and that's how they exist.
Right.
The Storm Surge not getting chapter tactics isn't the end of the world. It's not great, but yeah, Wraith Knights.
It sucks for Wraith Knights.
Sucks more for Wraith Knights.
I mean, yeah.
Poor Wraith Knights.
I feel bad for them already.
In general, like, as we said, the biggest losers are Knights. The biggest losers are just Titanics in general.
Right. Well, Knights. I mean, Wraith Knights are always like, and Storm Surges are like Knights minus, right? It's.
So unfortunately, yeah, those units I took a bit of a hit.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate. They're still playable if you still want to include them, but they're not amazing. And let's be honest, it's not like in 8th edition you saw that many Wraith Knights or Storm Surges. So it's not like they took a huge downward. they just stayed kind of where they are.
Right.
All right, let's talk about the approachability of 9th. We have some people in chat.
Yeah.
They pre-ordered their 9th edition box.
Yep.
They don't want to like go out and buy an 8th edition codex.
Okay.
How should they ease themselves into the pool that is Warhammer?
So, okay, I have a lot of opinions on this. In fact, one of the main things I noticed when I first started playtesting 9th is that in general, it's a more complicated game.
Much more complicated.
It's a more complicated game. There's more rules. As when I first started 8th edition, when you had the indexes, it was actually really straightforward. The rules, and there was that like little booklet of rules. Now, there's a couple advantages and disadvantages. The way I've been thinking about 9th edition is 9th edition is a game with so much more personality, right? Your factions are so much more unique.
Yep.
They're more asymmetrical, and they all play more to their fluff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's kind of a key thing there, and that added complexity is true. It is there. The game is going to be harder to get into, but it's more rewarding when you get into it.
Yeah, and like you said, they're really rewarding things like mono factions. So you don't have to be pulling from a million books. You can just kind of get one. You can play that way. You almost have to force kind of the expansion of all this information, or you have to say, I really want to run soup. So that's really nice. Having said that, we are planning on doing some how to play and how to get started videos because we know there's a lot happening. And so if you're already playing Warhammer, the added complexity is okay because what they're doing is clarifying using more words, right? So for you new players, we're trying to kind of help bridge that. So there's a shameless plug that we are working on
we are working on a how to play.
Yeah.
I really do think though, once you get over the initial hurdle, it's not going to be too bad.
It's
like
not as crazy as it seems.
Yeah, it is a complicated game. It is more complicated than the start of 8th edition.
Yeah.
But ultimately, there's a reward in that for you.
Okay, Brian, I know this is one you have an opinion on, and I've seen it in chat a few times now. Ghost Keels, Captain -1 to hit. What do they do?
Lots.
Well, okay, so of course, still that -2 negates anyone's pluses. There's still a lot of pluses out there.
Yep.
But more than anything, I like the drones now just being independent. And you have 2 units that are -1 now.
It's not an easy kill.
Yeah, and so now it's like up the board at the start of the game, I have these 2 units now, and I think of them as independent units. And one of them, goes over here and harasses or jumps on this early game objective and says, how you have to deal with me, while the rest of my army's kind of moving up. Yeah. So I kind of like it. MSU is going to work really well in this edition without the kill points, and that's a 2-for-1 -1 to hit unit. So I don't know, I'm into it. The Ghost Keel is going to be great, especially if you take the Ion, right? Because the Ion gun I think is not a blast weapon, but the fusion one is.
Right.
And so he's going to be up there tagging things, getting tagged. So he's moving and shooting now. You don't have to put that target lock on him. He's great. I'm into him.
All right. There seems to be a little bit of confusion about how the Supreme Command detachment works. Do you
Ooh,
want to just
that's a tricky
that?
one. The Supreme Command is an auto-include in every single one of your armies.
You will take it.
So you will take it every single day. So let's understand it. The Supreme Command is a detachment that can have 1 HQ or Titanic if that Titanic is like a Primarch or something. And that HQ has to be your Warlord. Mm-hmm. And or it can be your Warlord. And if it is your Warlord, then you get your other patrol, battalion, or brigade for free.
Right.
So what this is simulating is that if you have one battalion, which is very common, normally you'd only have your 3 HQ slots. Mm-hmm. If you want that 1 extra HQ, you can now buy the Supreme Command and get them both for free. Yep. So, but if you try to buy a different detachment, like an Outrider or a Vanguard, you do not get the CP refunded. And so you only want to take that Supreme Command kind of in conjunction with a patrol or a battalion mostly. I don't think you'll be taking that many brigades. We've not really been able to make it work with any faction. Yeah. So it's the patrols and it's the battalions. That it's really 1 extra free HQ, which is clutch for Tau, because that's how you get your second commander. That's how you get your second commander free, but it's so key for every faction.
It's key for a lot of armies. We've actually found that 4 is like just enough that you can actually have that army, you can play it. It might be a little bit more lean than you want. But that's kind of the sweet spot.
Most armies I'm building are 1 battalion, 1 Supreme Command, or 1 patrol, 1 Supreme Command.
The patrol has been so useful because it only costs you 2, right? So you're going down to 10 to start. It's not the end of the world, and you get a lot more slots. You get 2 more.
Well, it's free if it's the only detachment.
Well, sure, yeah.
So that's how I build my armies off of literally 1 patrol, 1 Supreme Command. Like a lot of my armies, like my Custodies armies, are built that way.
That's amazing.
So I'm into it.
Okay, so we very often, while we were going through our points, said, ooh, this is a negative for assault armies. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people feel similarly. Sure. What are some positives for assault armies? Let's say some stuff that's great. Maybe talk about Custodies. They're pretty good.
Custodies are fantastic.
We've continued to be impressed by Custodies every single game, and it's not been because of their shooting, obviously. It's been about their melee. Yeah, in fact, you take out all their shooting because you don't need it anymore. Oh my gosh,
so
good.
Okay, there are some pluses for combat armies, but you're going to have to think about them a little differently. Previously, assault armies were completely coming to you. Mm-hmm. They're coming across the board and coming at you. Yep. I actually think assault armies now are counter-assault. Yep. The assault army comes up to the middle of the board, it holds the objectives, and it says, if you don't come take these from me, I win. That's right. I'm getting my secondaries. I'm here. I'm safe here. So you can blast them all you want, but you have to be a teeny bit durable. So you have to take a combat army that can get to the center and be durable a bit. Think of like a Death Guard or a Custodies or something like that. Even Space Marine Terminators and things like that. Yeah. Things that can hold there. And then when they have to come to you to try and grab an objective, you battle them for it. Yeah. And you win because you're better at that close range. But if you're trying to sweep across the board and kind of Blood Angels first turn decapitate them, you're going to lose. That's not going to work. So you're going to think about your combat differently. Of course, the smaller table size, huge boost for those foot-slogging armies.
Yeah, it's great for melee armies that don't have all those ways of getting in the backfield. And honestly, a lot of the time when you're getting into the opponent's backfield right away, you are sacrificing so much, you're exposing yourself, and really it doesn't pay off anymore, right? Yeah. You actually get rewarded for taking these points, for countercharging, things like that. So, I mean, especially playing things like the Death Guard and Orcs, and I play a lot of melee Orcs, I completely changed the way that I play them, but they're still very much about melee, which has been cool. Yes. It's just different.
Absolutely. So I think there are definitely some pluses, and you're just going to play melee differently. It's counterpunch, it's still grab the center, and you're going to have to look for soft targets, but you can't run out of gun line in 9th edition.
No, you can't. But the other thing is, again, it's about objectives, right? So we have a lot of, I predict people are going to be making a lot of shooting armies, but those shooting armies, unless they can absolutely table the person extremely quickly, they might not be able to hold the board, right? You still have to be able to do that, and so you're going to play to those strengths and disadvantages. If I don't know, a shooting list gets on the objective, you just countercharge them, kill them, unless they actually have a balanced force.
Like our Assault Intercessor army was a very effective army because it just floods the board with the intercessors, and they just stand there going like, okay, my points, max primary, max secondary, and you're like, oh, I'm shooting through them, but they're not going away. There's so many. They've got the feel no pains, and they're just standing there, and then it's like, okay, I guess I'll get a little close, and they're like 1 billion attacks, you dead.
Yeah, and that's one of our favorite lists that we've made so far. So.
Yeah, it's a great one, and the Custodies one, it's great.
All right, last question.
Okay.
Because we have to prepare for our game.
Yeah.
10 victory points for fully painted army, huh? What's
Yes.
that about?
Yes.
I'm into it.
Proponent of that.
I'm super into it. The one thing that they didn't do perfectly is they talk about battle ready. This is what you have to be battle ready. And they've given some examples online of battle ready. Like before tournaments use the 3 color minimum. Battle ready is not 3 colors.
No.
Battle ready is not only based, but they call it fully painted. And they show an example of like some few more details and things like that. It's still ambiguous. Is my model battle ready? And it's going to cause conflicts when you have somebody. It's like, hey, we didn't talk about this before the game.
Right.
We rolled up, and I'm losing by 1 point, and you have one model that's not fully painted. And now I say to you, like, oh, but you're not battle ready, right? So you're actually getting 10 points less.
Right.
I'm getting my 10 points.
Yeah.
I win now. And
So
I
awkward.
really, really don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
So have a very serious conversation before your games. Am I battle ready? And then you're gonna have to. Judges are gonna have to be a lot more thoughtful. GW, I think, is gonna have to do a better job of really calling out. Here's battle ready. Like, show me a painted version of every troop choice from every army.
Right.
Of like, here's battle ready for this faction.
And show me just short of that too, honestly.
Yeah.
It's kind of important. And
right.
again,
Show me pass fail.
yeah, because it's hard for some people, and it doesn't mean it has to be painted well, right? It has to have effort, it has to have a certain standard of paint on a certain number of details. Again, it's going to be on the TO, it's going to be on us to do at the start of the game, but I like it, right?
I'm super
It's
into
good.
it, and of course, I don't know if people will play with it at home. I think they might rule it out. I think you should, but I'm a snob, and I'm part of a narrative group here that's called Fault Line. And just to join, your army has to be like masterclass painted.
Right.
Just to join the club, if you're not fully amazingly painted, they'll be like, nah, you can come back next year when you're painted.
Right.
So I'm part of a very snobby group. This is already totally cool for me. I would up it from that, beyond. Get 50 points, battle ready.
That's right.
So I think that's it. We're going to cut it there.
Yeah.
We've got a game coming up in less than an hour, I think, now. So we've got a lot to prepare for.
We do.
We've got the Tau against the Space Marines, because those are the first 2 factions that we've previewed. You're going to get to see how the mission really plays out, how these 2 factions come out. And the lists we're building are 2 fairly tough lists, but we're not trying to build like tournament lists here. So we're just trying to show the way the game. We're just trying to show the way the game plays.
Absolutely.
And get you a sense of the objectives, the secondary objectives, which are impossible. So it's sure to be a lot of fun. So we hope to see you back here in just a little less than an hour.
We'll see you guys then.